Hi there, it's John from Fantastic Tales and Adventures here. You're very welcome here today. In this video, I'm going to be talking about giving feedback. I've covered personal editing in a previous video, and if you haven't seen it, a link will appear on screen just now. It is worth your while to check it out as it sets up this video. I've opted to keep the videos separate as I don't want them to be too long, and I did not want to cram the feedback into the last 5 minutes of the last video. So, on we go, learning about feedback. First, let's do a bit of an exercise, and this needs to be done as a part of a group and works best if you've done the stuff covered in the editing video. For this exercise, you will need a piece of writing around 500 to 1000 words printed out twice, some paper to write notes on, and a group of people who have done the same thing. If you've done the editing tutorial, you should have a piece of writing of suitable length and with a few thoughts about it ready for feedback. If you've not done this tutorial, there's a link for it on screen just now. Pause the video, go away, do that one, and come back when you're ready. I'll be here ready to help with the next stage. Failing that, any piece of writing of suitable length will do. I recommend the edit video as I make a number of suggestions about good etiquette and editing to be done before giving of feedback, but it is entirely up to you. Okay, you have your pieces of writing now. Pass one to the person to your left. You will also be receiving a piece from the person to your right. Now everybody write feedback on what you've received. Don't worry that we haven't been through any useful information yet. The purpose here is just to get people started and highlight if you have any bad habits. Pause the video and spend as long as you need doing this. Once everyone is done, restart the video. But don't share your feedback at this point. Remember, the purpose here is for you, the person giving feedback, to learn how to give better feedback. So, you have someone's piece of work in front of you. They've told you their genre, gave you a rough idea of what they're trying to achieve, and asked for some specific bits of feedback. Where do you start? Reading the piece through completely is a good idea. When feeding back on a shortish piece, I always read it through in its entirety before giving feedback. This is because too often I've fallen into a trap of saying, this doesn't make sense, when in fact the information required was just a page or two later, and it actually did make sense. See the big picture and avoid that rookie mistake. And now you've read it through and you're wanting to give feedback. So what's next? An early instinct of a lot of my peers has been to say something like, I really like this piece, or words to that effect. This is always really nice to hear, but it isn't particularly useful as a critical feedback for a number of reasons. Firstly, liking and disliking is a matter of personal taste. You will always have people who like or dislike your work. True, if you get a lot of people saying that they like your work and they have similar reading tastes, then you might get an idea about what group your writing appeals to. But on its own, I like this is not terribly useful as anything other than an ego boost. Secondly, it puts the person giving feedback into the wrong mindset. They start thinking that if they don't like a genre, then they are reluctant to give feedback on it. It also blinkers them. They find flaws where there may not be flaws, simply because they do not like it. Your enjoyment of a genre or story when you're providing feedback is not relevant. This is a harsh statement to reinforce a point. Your purpose in reading at this point is not for pleasure, it is to help the editing process of another writer. These aren't mutually exclusive, but neither is it necessary for you to like the piece. In many respects, I would encourage you to give feedback outside your favoured genre, as it will increase your critical skill and your knowledge of technique and make you a better writer. And you should do it all never mentioning your opinion. This was a habit I adopted as I found myself reading things that I wasn't enjoying. However, I could still see what the writer was trying to do and feedback on whether they were successful or not. And if telling a writer you enjoyed their work is not terribly useful, telling them you didn't enjoy it is worse. Okay, I laboured that point as it's a personal bugbear of mine. Next, you're critiquing the writing, not the writer. Feedback should never ever be personal. I don't think that really needs much more of an explanation to it. Next, be specific. Sometimes certain things about a piece just don't work. A page might bore you, writing might jar you out of the paragraph, or a character might spoil it for you. Tell the writer what part didn't work, and explain why it didn't work for you. The explanation is important as it reduces personal bias and can help the writer see where there are technical problems. Here are a couple of examples of less useful feedback. Do not use cliches. Your sentences are too long. Both pieces of feedback in the proper context are useful. On their own, they aren't. The first, don't use cliches, was one sentence feedback I got at the end of a piece from one person a while back. It wasn't any use to me at the time. I hadn't realised I used cliches, or else I would have avoided them like the plague. More useful would be to highlight a phrase such as avoid cliches like the plague and say, this is a cliche, and unless it is a deliberate choice, you may wish to remove it, as cliches tend to be overused and thus become boring and predictable. Specificity. The second is a piece of feedback I get a lot because I favour long sentences. The person feeding back may actually be right about the length, or they may simply not have liked that the sentence was long. A more useful piece of feedback would be, this specific sentence is too long as you are saying the exact same thing twice, and these words serve no purpose. Again, specificity is key. Where possible, avoid offering alternatives unless you can think of no other way to highlight something. You are feeding back, but it isn't your piece of work. You have your style and so does the writer. Your suggestion is no more right than any other. Highlight what doesn't work for you and explain why, but it isn't really appropriate to tell the recipient what they should do to solve it, unless they ask you what you might do. And, if a person has specific questions regarding their work, answer them. If a writer takes the time to do that, then honour that request as it is making your job easier. So those are the major points of feedback from my point of view. I've got no doubt there are others to consider, however, let us put what we have discussed here to use. Pause the video and pass the second copy of your work to the person on your left and receive one from the right. Give feedback a second time using the guidance on screen. Once everyone is done, remembering that criticism is of writing and not writer, present your feedback to the writer. Do this one-on-one, then press play when everyone is done. So, now everyone should have gotten some feedback and it is time for me to refer back to the editing video again. I covered 3 rules of editing and feedback which will pop up on screen just now. I mentioned then that there was a 4th rule for writers receiving feedback. For me it is the Cardinal Rule and I'm going to make a big deal about it now. You are free to ignore any feedback that is given, and if you choose to do that, the person giving the feedback should respect that decision. It is your piece, not theirs. It is supremely arrogant of an individual to demand that you comply with all of their criticisms. Agents and publishers may do this, but they are doing that from a perspective of their general market and what they think they will be able to sell. So, in cases like that, you probably should listen to them. However, in a peer group, or any other situation that is less formal, if you've heard feedback, and you've been open to it, and for good reason have rejected it, that is the end of the discussion. A person once tried to argue with me after they had given me feedback and it was feedback that I disagreed with. I thanked the individual and explained my reasoning behind my rejecting of their feedback. That person decided that they were right and I was wrong and argued. Come what may, the piece of writing was mine, making it my decision. Thank you for taking the time, but I'm going to go my own way to success now or success later with it. Do not be afraid to challenge feedback. Sometimes people don't get what you are doing, and sometimes they are wrong. It is your work. You are best qualified to judge your intent. You decide. Okay, so that's it for feedback. You should be better equipped now to critique the work of others and your own. Just as an exercise, take the feedback you've received and incorporate anything you feel is appropriate and then distribute copies to members of your group. Once everyone has copies of everyone else's work, give feedback on each. This will help your critical skills and it will give you a broader range of feedback for yourself. Go on, give it a try. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. You can find links to my blog and social media in the description below, and you can support this channel by clicking on the button on screen just now. All the best. Happy writing!